The purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement is to promote justice and equity for Black America. For generations, we have seen abuse of power and neglect to this community, especially by the justice system and law enforcement. The BLM movement has been portrayed in many different ways over the years, but today I'm going to outline some key events that shaped the movement. We have the death of Trayvon Martin. Trayvon was walking home from 7-Eleven in Sanford, Florida, after buying some Skittles and an Arizona tea. A neighborhood watch volunteer named George Zimmerman called 911 and told the dispatch that there was, quote, a real suspicious guy and he looks like he's up to no good or on drugs or something, because it was raining and Trayvon was walking. Zimmerman continued to follow Trayvon even after being instructed by dispatch to not follow him. Some witnesses state that they heard loud yelling followed by a gunshot, which was discovered to be Zimmerman's. Some witnesses also state seeing Zimmerman on the ground and Trayvon punching him. What exactly happened during their interaction is unknown, but what caused outrage in the community is not only that Trayvon was unarmed and walking home from the store, but he was confronted by a person who is not law enforcement. He was profiled, and Zimmerman took it upon himself to approach this 17-year-old Black male because he thought he was suspicious. And to top this all off, Zimmerman was not found guilty in the murder of Trayvon. Next, we have the death of Eric Garner. On July 17, 2014, Eric was confronted by officers in Long Island, New York, after being suspected of selling cigarettes. After questioning the officers about their intent, they attempted to cuff him and he was placed into a chokehold and wrestled to the ground by several officers. In the video, Eric can be heard saying repeatedly, "I can't breathe," while the officers continued to pin him down to the sidewalk and cause his death. After this, protests erupted across the country in the days after his death, and the phrase, "I can't breathe," became one of the many calls to end police brutality. A month later, on August 9, 2014, Michael Brown was shot in the middle of the street in Ferguson, Missouri. An officer instructed Michael and his friend to use the sidewalk, and after some words were exchanged, Michael was shot in the head. Witnesses say that his hands were up when he was shot. Also, his body was left in the street for 4 hours on a hot summer day. This event can be seen as a turning point in the movement, as it was an awakening after the death of Trayvon in 2012 and Eric not even a month earlier. The phrase, "no justice, no peace," and "hands up, don't shoot" were takeaways from the protests following this event. March 13th, 2020, Breonna Taylor was fatally shot in her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky. 3 officers used a battering ram to break down the apartment door under a no-knock warrant with intentions to catch her ex-boyfriend and find drugs. Breonna and her current boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, were in bed at the time of the event. The officers fired at least 25 shots into the apartment blindly, and 8 of them struck Breonna while she was asleep. Her boyfriend called 911 and said, "Somebody kicked in the door, shot my girlfriend," as he watched her die. This outraged the public because the officers did not have body cameras on, and there were discrepancies in their report saying that Breonna had no injuries and she didn't receive medical attention for at least 20 minutes after she was shot. A recent death on a long list of names that I did not mention in this video is George Floyd. On May 25, 2020, George was accused of buying cigarettes with a fake $20 bill. After the store employees unsuccessfully got the money back from George, they called 911. When the officers arrived on the scene, the footage shows George sitting on the ground in cuffs and complying. The interaction changed when the officers tried to get George into the back of the car, but he refused because he said he is claustrophobic and could not breathe. At this point, another police car arrived with officers Chauvin and Tao. After 2 of the officers forced George into the back of their car, Chauvin pulls him out of the other side onto the street. In all of the witness videos circulating, you can see Officer Chauvin kneeling on the back of George's neck and George saying repeatedly, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And people were telling the officer to get off, but he refused. In the videos, we see George struggling and pleading for help. What we also see is the second George loses his life. Even though witnesses tell Chauvin that George is dead, he does not get off of him until the EMT physically tells him to. In conclusion, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd are only a few of the victims of police brutality. The purpose of this movement is not to say that Black Lives Matter more than anyone else's. The purpose is to bring awareness to the daily lives of Black people in America. The only officers that face serious charges are the ones involved with killing George Floyd. These innocent people were victims of those with prejudice and unconscious bias that is fueled by a system that fails to hold those in power accountable for their actions. Racism is built into nearly every American system, and this movement is a platform to bring changes that are long overdue.